Hey there, this is Ben. Thanks for coming by my channel. I wanted to do this really quick intro to this episode, my conversation with a carnivore, being one myself. But the reason for the intro is that this conversation was recorded 6 months ago and the content is still just as relevant, if not more so. I'm 12 months into eating just meat, eggs, dairy, and pretty much nothing else other than obviously salt and a little bit of flavorings here and there. But pretty strict on the carnivore diet. It's been the most restrictive diet I've ever attempted, and certainly for this long. But somehow it's been the easiest diet to keep to. And I think that's one, the simplicity of it. Two, the feedback my body has given me on the diet, which has been overwhelmingly positive, although it was a rocky road for the first few months. And some people kind of have a rocky road for a week, 2 weeks, maybe a month. I think it depends on your current health. I have Crohn's disease. I have attempted to manage Crohn's disease naturally, as in not with the use of pharmaceutical drugs, for the last over 20 years. So if you're recovering from that sort of stuff, your body's not going to probably just turn on a dime. You've got to give it some time. And in this conversation, actually, Christina recommends that you give it at least 90 days, no matter what you're doing it for, whether you're to lose weight, whether you're to try and manage a metabolic illness like diabetes, or you're trying to manage an autoimmune disease and bring down inflammation in your body. The carnivore diet is absolutely fantastic for any of those things, but you've got to give it some time to do the change. Listen to this conversation. We answer a lot of the number one questions that I get constantly about the carnivore diet is like, what about fiber? What about all your nutrients, your essential nutrients? Aren't you missing out on a lot? Do you have to supplement a lot? And all of this stuff, it's so counterintuitive to what we've heard for so long. So we get into those questions, and Christina's great. She answers them so well. She's a naturopath, has done all the nutrition science as well as the naturopathy side of things. And she's a practitioner, so she's helping people at different stages, but certainly seen the most benefit from people who use the carnivore diet to manage chronic illness and weight loss. This is not, here I am, I have all the answers, and we're going to talk about all the answers for your health. That's certainly not what it is. Everybody knows is about tapping in to our body's intelligence and healing journey to allow it to be in a great environment to heal itself and to listen. But everyone, I think, for as many people there are on the planet, there are the same amount of unique journeys to find health, body, mind, and spirit, and your journey is your own. But I definitely feel like the approach of a carnivore diet can be part of a great healing process for everyone, and at least a really, really awesome elimination style diet that you might like to go on for 90 days or more or less, or keep on going like myself. Thanks for being here. Enjoy this conversation. Christina, thank you so much for joining me this morning. It's awesome to meet you, and thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, you're very welcome, Ben. It's nice to meet you too. Always a pleasure to meet a fellow carnivore and talk about this stuff.
It's very new to me, even though I've been doing carnivore for 6 months. I have Crohn's disease. I was diagnosed when I was a kid, so I've had it for about 30 years now. It's been obviously a roller coaster, and that's par for the course with Crohn's or any really chronic illness. And I've had some major surgeries along the way, but I've been 20 years med-free.
Wow.
With Crohn's.
Well done.
Yeah, and that hasn't been just, a walk in the park, of course, and there's been some flare-ups and some presence of the disease, but I've kind of, as much as possible, made the decision that I want to be able to manage this with my whole body and being, if you like, in mind. Mm-hmm. And at the very least, do everything to support my body to be able to heal and not sort of
take one intervention that then has an impact on other systems and other things and makes my mind go crazy, like in the case of steroids or something like that. So where possible. And I found that medical intervention has been great, saved my life. I've had 2 major emergency surgeries for Crohn's, removing big abscesses and things like that. So pretty aggressive Crohn's. And that's been great for those times when you need that immediate intervention. But for wellness and keeping myself and my body, I guess, in some sort of alignment and peace, which I know is part of is a massive part of what you do as a naturopath. So with that in mind, can you, introduce yourself, your experience, your passion, and then we'll get into sort of how you came about the carnivore diet.
Yeah, awesome. So for those at home, my name is Christina Mathewson. I'm a naturopath, and I've worked as a naturopath and a health coach for like the last 15 years of my life. And so that is my work, but my personal life right now, I've been carnivore 603 days now myself. And so just remembering my little book this morning, 603, because I passed over the 600 mark the other day. And I am in no hurry ever to go back.
So let's dig into that. How did you come across the carnivore diet? How did that fit in with your naturopath kind of background? And why? I know you mentioned that you had a critical health situation a few years ago, and you went to the best thing you knew to heal your gut and get yourself back on track. So explain that for us.
Yes. So in order to kind of explain that story, I kind of need to go back a little bit as well. So for me, when I was 16, maybe 15, my dad was diagnosed with diabetes. And I remember in my 15, 16-year-old brain watching my dad go through what he did, which was, prick his finger, and then he got on to, had to take medication, and then he had to inject himself with insulin, and watching that. And in my teenagehood, where life is a bit, pie in the sky thinking, I was like, if I ever get that, I'm just going to kill myself. I don't want to live with that. That's watching the way that he was living. I made a decision at that point. I just don't want to live like that. And then fast forward, another 10 or so years, and I get married and I get pregnant. And during that pregnancy, I get gestational diabetes. And then I'm reminded of this moment in my 15, 16-year-old brain where I said, I don't want to live like this. And I'm suddenly going, yeah, you whammed me there, life, because I don't actually want to die right now. And I can't do that because it's really unfair to the baby that I have inside for me to do those types of things. So I was in this position where I went, all right, well, I guess I better figure out what's going on then, instead of taking this pathway that's pretty dramatic. And so I did. I was working at the University of Tasmania at the time. I went into the library and I pulled out all the medical books that I could actually find. And I have this memory of sitting on the floor reading through what is diabetes, what causes diabetes, what's gestational diabetes, what are the problems, what are the issues from the obstetrics perspective, etc. So I just read everything that I could find on this condition, because for me to be able to nut it out would help me do the whys and the what fors and etc. in that treatment plan. And one of the things that just was very, very shocking for me to read was that within the last 6 weeks of pregnancy, if you're taking insulin, your baby's at a higher risk of dying of stillbirth. And I went, wow, if I can avoid insulin, then that's a risk I don't have to actually take. And I know from the medical side of things, they're monitoring you more during that period of time, and they're likely to deliver your baby earlier, etc. So they're reducing some of those risk factors. But in my mind, I went, if I don't have to have that as a risk factor, why would I not do everything in my absolute power to actually avoid that? And so I had these two juxtaposition things that were going on. I was going to the doctor and the diabetes educator, and I was reading these medical textbooks. And they were very different informations, in the sense that I would go to the diabetes educator and she would say, well, this is how much Coca-Cola you can have. This is how much pasta you can have. This is how much, grains and rice you can have, et cetera, et cetera. And it was really quite a high carbohydrate rich diet. But everything that I was reading in these medical textbooks was that it was a carbohydrate conversion problem. And so why wouldn't I want to reduce my carbohydrates rather than actually increase them, which is the information that they were giving me. And so at that point in time, I made a decision to just ignore them. and to do my own thing. And so what I was learning was that meat doesn't really have any carbohydrates in it. And so in that pregnancy, I actually basically went, hyper carnivore, almost carnivore in that pregnancy without actually having those terms for it. And what I did was successfully reduce my blood glucose to the point that the recommendation for insulin was dropped because there was no need for it to actually be there. And I went along that whole pregnancy without having to have any medication for that pregnancy. But it came from me ignoring the current medical advice on what I should be doing and so on. And that was the instigator for me to kind of start my whole space of naturopathy and learning about natural therapies and the power of food as medicine versus just listening to what we're being told and what we're being taught from our medical professionals. So then fast forward another 20 years, that baby's now 20, and it was COVID. And during that period of time, I was flat chat because I work in 5 different countries. And so I had patients from all these different countries that were logging in, wanting to work out how do I keep myself healthy during this time, or I've got COVID, what should I do? Or I'm post-COVID, what do I need to do to prevent long COVID? And all of that sort of stuff. So I was working the candle at both ends. And that meant that I was not looking after my own health during that period of time, which essentially meant that my husband, who is amazing and can cook to an extent, but could burn water, was providing food for us at that point in time while I was doing a lot of work, which meant that we had a lot of, pizzas and really quick and easy things that he could actually make. And so at the end of that sort of year and a half period, I was getting really tired. And I'm not a day sleep person. I'm a let's go hard on person. So if I need a day sleep, I'm starting to think something's wrong with me. And so I was having some day sleeps and I went, I think I haven't tested my blood glucose in a while. Maybe it's a good idea to do that. And I did. And I got the shock of my life because my fasting blood glucose was 21.2. So anyone who knows anything about fasting blood glucose, it really shouldn't be over like a 6 at max. And so at that point in time, I was hospital sort of space. If I'd gone to a GP, they would have just fast tracked me straight to the hospital, put me on some insulin and done a whole bunch of different things at the hospital. And I went, nah, I don't want to do that. I'm not going to do that. And I took full responsibility knowing that this is my health and I'm not recommending people at home do this. This was me choosing to be responsible for my own health, monitoring everything, of course, and being very careful in that sense. And so I went back to my original roots of what I did when I had gestational diabetes. And I went, you know what, I've been hearing about carnivore. I've been using meat-based diets, but I've never gone to the point for myself of just removing the vegetables. I've done it for patients before, but I hadn't done it for myself. And so I went, I'm going to do it for 90 days and actually see what happens. And within that 90 days, I'd brought my blood glucose down completely. Wasn't completely in range at that point, but I'd dramatically taken myself out of those risk factors and I didn't really have anything that was too high from a blood glucose perspective once I'd made that shift. So that's kind of the nutshell of naturopathy into carnivore, etc. But there's loads of stuff in between there.
Yeah, wow. There's a number of things that you picked up on there that I can hear other people saying. And when I talk about my success with Crohn's in the last 6 months, and they, lots of people have got autoimmune issues and diabetes or pre-diabetes. And there's that willingness to hear, but it's a bit scary. Like you said, you were choosing to go against pretty much all the messaging out there about diet, about health, about the nutrients you need, and so there's a real, there's a real fear about diving into that. And I can do it myself. I don't know. I'm just that type of person. I'll be the guinea pig, and it sounds like you are too. And you did, sounds like a lot more research, and obviously you've got that naturopathy background as well. For me, it is all experience. And listening to my body and going, well, I mustn't be I'm living a full life. I've got four young kids, a wife, I work full time. I do a lot of things. I'm active, sports, health, all that sort of stuff. So the evidence for me is there, and I'd rather trial that than trial one of the latest medications, because I've done that a few times, and that hasn't gone well for me. It's sort of robbing from Peter and giving to Paul kind of thing in a way. And so I've been willing to, but there's so many people I want to hear about. Like, there's amazing, results that you've had personally. I want to hear about do you recommend this diet for all of the patients that you see? And how do they go with hearing this sort of thing?
So that's an interesting question, because the way that I practice is it's a choose your own adventure. You can choose your own adventure, and I can present you with different options on what adventure you want to go on, and you get to choose which way that is. But I can tell you the fastest way to get there, and the slowest way to get there. You'll still get there, but you'll get there at a much slower rate. You might be looking at years versus months of actually getting to the place that you actually want to go. And so I'll present them with the options. It's your choice. I don't know what's going on. You might be going through a divorce. You might be having, major renovation in your house, and making major dietary changes right in this moment is going to be really, really hard for you. But most people who get to the point of making major dietary changes, they're just so sick of being sick. They're just so sick of having something wrong with them, or being told that they're broken, when actually it's not about them being broken. It's about mismatching the food that their body actually needs to nourish themselves, and having a lifestyle that doesn't quite match either. Like, they might have a lifestyle that's massively stressful, but they don't do any rebalancing of, like, I need to also rest and recoup and refuel myself in a way that's going to help me facilitate that stress that I have in my life. And so from that perspective, I present multiple options for people. But most people now, having been carnivore now for nearly 2 years and sharing my own journey on social media, most people come along and they go, "You're not going to tell me to go carnivore, are you?" My answer to that question is often, well, it would be amazing for you and it would get you there really fast. But it's up to you. You're an adult and you're allowed to choose your own medical choices. That's what I believe in. You're allowed to choose it. And this choice might get you faster where you want to go. And this choice might mean you need to rely on some medications to be able to do that.
Yep. So it's always a holistic approach, but obviously I assume you've seen some great results from carnivore diet. Can you talk to me about what sort of conditions that you've seen, the biggest results for?
So I've seen results in just about everything. And that's the thing that I love about carnivore, is that so much can actually be fixed or supported. The healing process can be supported, let's put it, with that carnivore diet. Because what you're really doing is, when you're going carnivore, is you're dramatically reducing the amount of toxins that are coming via your mouth through those plants, and as well as junk food and everything else. You're dramatically reducing that. And what you're doing is absolutely amplifying the amount of nutrient dense food that's coming into your body. And so there isn't anything that I've come across yet at this point that couldn't be helped by going carnivore. And that's the amazing part of it. Like, I have oncology patients, and they may choose or they may not choose to go down the pathway of chemotherapy. Either way, I know that carnivore is going to help them get the best fighting chance of actually healing their body and rebalancing and correcting. And that's one of the things that I'll say to my oncology patients, that you can go down the pathway of chemotherapy and so on, and it might help you get out of this situation that you're in. But if we don't ever go back and actually address why you were there in the first place, which is most likely, toxic environment, toxic life, toxic food that's coming in, if we don't address those things, then you're going to be back here again. And so your longer term approach might be, let's try and get out of this scenario now by using the medical system to help me out of this emergency situation. But you want to look beyond that situation and move into, how do I live a life now that keeps me out of having to keep going back to that emergency situation? And so I've seen people from adrenal fatigue. I've got a patient at the moment. She's just given birth to a new baby, and she's 53. She went through menopause and then met a new partner. They wanted to have a baby. She didn't think she could. They just thought, let's get healthy. She came out of menopause, now has just had the baby that they wanted to have together. And so I see so many different conditions that have been helped with going carnivore. And it's really, we're just amplifying how many nutrients your body's being exposed to so it can do the work that it wants to do, because your body always wants to choose life. It always wants to live and live life abundantly. But if you don't give it the building blocks to be able to do that, it's got to do this patchwork quilt thing where it's trying to make things the best that it can, but it has to do a bit of a patch job rather than a fix-it job.
Yeah, you mentioned about, I want to get into some of the specifics now because, you've mentioned plant toxins, and this is so opposite to, as we said before, the message and the recommendations that we get really everywhere else. What are you talking about? Plant toxins, aren't fruit and veggies good for you? In fact, wouldn't the best diet be just fruit and vegetables? I mean, we're recommended to have, five every day. Like, are they lying to us? And isn't the best diet that they promote now the Mediterranean diet? It's kind of a fix-all. It's the best for everyone. Apparently, it's, yes, some meat, some red meat, but limited and has to be lean. And now when we go to carnivore, you've kind of got to pretty much just throw that out and do basically the opposite.
Yeah.
How is it? How are plant toxins? What are you talking about? Explain how it's so opposite and why.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a couple of things that you mentioned there, one of which was the Mediterranean diet. And I just want to put a pin in that, in the sense of saying that when the Mediterranean diet was studied by Ansel Keys at the time that he was studying it, they were in Lent. So Lent is when they have a period of time where they're basically vegan for that period of time. And then they come out of it and they feast on meat. Like, they actually have this animal feast that they have. But he only studied them during their Lent period and not through their feasting period. And therefore has gone, this period where they're doing Lent, which is their form of fed fasting, where they're eating food, but it's basically a fast, and promoted that as why those people were healthy versus the abundance of animal products that those people were actually eating majority of the year round, except for this little period where they were doing Lent or some of the other fasts that they were doing there. But when it comes to plant toxins, one of the ways I like to describe it to people is, if I've got a deer in my backyard, or I've got a goat or a sheep or whatever that I want to eat, it has mechanical defense mechanisms. That goat, it's got horns, it can butt me. It's got feet, it can try and run away from me, it can try and kick me, it can wriggle, it can make it really, really hard for me to try and kill that animal and actually consume it. If it's a deer out in the wild, it's got fantastic senses of smell, fantastic hearing. We've got to trick that animal into not seeing us and hearing us to be able to catch it, because it's got really great mechanical defense mechanisms. Well, your broccoli that you might also have growing out in your backyard, it doesn't want to be eaten either. It doesn't want to be eaten anywhere, the same level of that deer doesn't want to be eaten, neither does the broccoli. There's nothing on this planet that actually is willing to surrender its life so that you might live, other than maybe your mother. Like, that's probably the only person that's willing to really sacrifice themselves so that you can actually thrive and live. Other than that, everything else on this planet wants to live, including the plants. And they have this beautiful, like, when you really study plants, they have this beautiful communication system with each other. Like grass, for example. Grass knows when the cow's coming near and they stop growing because they communicate with each other. But getting back to the broccoli, it can't pick up its roots and go, oh, Ben's coming outside with a knife now, we better try and run away and defend ourselves. It can't do that. And so what it does instead is it has what we call stand-in-place chemical warfare. And that chemical warfare is essentially the toxins that the plant actually releases. And we know there's really about 300 and possibly even more as we start to study them at a greater level, different plant toxins. And some of the big ones are things like oxalates. We talk about that quite a lot, leptins, etc. There's a whole bunch of these chemical warfare chemicals that these plants actually have. And so they release those in order to prevent things like bugs eating them, from other wild animals eating them, but they maybe reduce them when it comes to an animal that creates a symbiotic relationship with it, where it serves the plant for them to eat it. And it's usually to eat their fruit because that's going to help it reproduce. But other than that, the plant doesn't want you to eat its roots because that's how it stores energy. It's its refrigerator. It's how it keeps its own energy going. It doesn't want you to eat its leaves because that's how it creates photosynthesis from the sun. That's how it creates its energy. And if you eat its leaves, it dies. It doesn't want you to eat its flowers because that's how it has its babies. That's its reproductive system. Its fruit, it may, for some people, want you to eat it because you'll spread it. And if you think about when we were kids and we ate watermelon back in the days before they sterilized watermelon, you'd eat it and then you'd walk around spitting out pips everywhere, and you'd maybe go, I don't know if I want to eat it because there's so many pips and I can't be bothered spitting out the pips. So, there was that scenario where we were spreading the seed when we were eating it, where the plant may reduce that enough that you can actually tolerate it and it's not a problem. And that's where some of the population sit. But a vast majority of the population are now sitting on the other side of the fence where they actually can't tolerate those because their life is so toxic. Their world is so toxic, and they've consumed toxic food for such a long period of time that their digestive system is like, please, buddy, don't give me any more. I can't handle anymore. And when I talk about it from that toxic level, that's what I mean. Those plant toxins can be vastly, there's a vast amount of them. Like, Dr. Anthony Chaffee talks about Brussels sprouts having 136 known carcinogens in them. Most things that you find in the supermarket are going to have anywhere between 60 to 100 plus known carcinogens in them. Do we want to be putting those things in our body when we know that they can be cancer causing? If we don't need them, they're not providing us with any nutritional benefit that we can't get from somewhere else, and we're trying to reclaim back our health. It doesn't make sense to me.
But I've only heard that red meat causes cancer. I mean, it seems to be the bane of existence these days. Like, red meat, the latest is it causes diabetes, it causes cardiovascular disease, saturated fats are terrible. It's not negotiable. It's kind of a fact. And even it's now destroying the planet, apparently. So, why is the messaging so different? What's your take on that?
This is a conversation that I love to have because it's an educational conversation. And that is, we've got to go back to the research that said that and ask the questions like, what were they actually looking at when they said red meat causes cancer? And most of those studies were done with things like hot dogs and chips. And so the hot dog, which we're counting as red meat, or the McDonald's burger that we're counting as red meat, and we're completely ignoring the Coke that they had with it and the chips that they had with it. And we're only looking at the meat that they had with it, which for majority of people would understand that I wouldn't count a hot dog as red meat. I wouldn't count something that's got a lot of flour and other, chemical binders, etc., and flavor enhancers as red meat. So very few studies have actually just looked at eating red meat. Now, there are a couple where they've looked at red meat and they've actually looked at, say, a steak or a lamb, chop, etc., and that's been the red meat that they've counted as red meat. But they also didn't look at what else was on the plate. And what else was on the plate are things like, a big heaping of mashed potatoes and a big heaping of these vegetables. And so they've gone, the only culprit on that plate is the red meat. No one's ever yet done a study that is actually just looked at a carnivore, for example, who's only actually eating red meat. They've not done that study yet. And so these claims that red meat causes cancer are actually just that. They're only claims because there is no hard and fast study that's actually done a proper look where we've isolated the actual food and we've done that in a really strategic way so that we can know that it is just that food that is creating that problem. And so instead, we're actually surmising it. And, remember, headlines sell newspapers. And so if I'm writing a study and I want to get that study out to the world, I'm going to make some really wild claims to actually help get that pushed out, because most newspaper journalists don't even read the study. They read the conclusion. And if you've ever done science, you shouldn't put whatever you like in the conclusion, but you can put whatever you like in the conclusion. Doesn't actually need to even match.
Yeah. Yeah, and they wouldn't look at any potential conflict of interest either with, researchers or funders or anything like that. Because as I understand, our big pharma and big food have got a whole lot more money pouring into research that is only going to support their products at the end of the day. They're not going to put out research. They're going to, they can easily throw away research that finds that the products that they sell are not good for consumption.
Exactly. They can alter the data, so they can go, well, this didn't give us quite what we wanted to say, so we'll just ditch that part of the study. And they can squash a study altogether. So if they do a study that doesn't actually align with the results that they want it to say, they can squash that study so that nobody ever sees it. And then they can reconstruct the study in a way that tries to help them get the results that they're actually wanting to get with their hypothesis of my product is good for you, versus actually being unbiased. Money makes the world go round. Like, nobody's going to pay, unless maybe we can get the beef guys on board, like, the cattle farmers, to put their hands in their pockets and fund some research. Very few people are actually going to pay for that because nobody's making the money from it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a sad fact, isn't it? But it is, you have to, whether you kind of go on a conspiratorial kind of wavelength where there's big, bad, nasty, evil plot out there, you can believe that if you want to, that's fine, and that's, that's influencing everything. Or you can simply believe that it's the world is run by money, and corporations are funding research. I mean, it's bought. The research that we get is so often bought by corporations looking to make a return on investment on their massive investments. And it does, it's a massive investment to put in, particularly human trials. And then when you're trialing a diet, there's not a return on investment because nobody's selling a diet. There's not a product really that can be, scaled. So it's the unfortunate fact, and it doesn't have to be a big conspiracy. It's just the fact of how the world turns.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too there is that when you start to learn to look at studies, one of the elements is you've got to understand the language that science uses. So, for example, there is studies that would say that sodium is bad for heart and it's bad for blood pressure. So we want to reduce sodium if you've got high blood pressure. Well, when you go back and actually read the study and what they actually found, in that science, what they'll say is that sodium reduces blood pressure. Now, how much does it actually reduce? Well, what they found in the study was that reduced blood pressure, by reducing sodium, you reduce blood pressure by 0.02%. Now, in the science, they'll say that's significant, because significant in science doesn't mean it's important in the sense that, like, you and I would go, that's a significant improvement. No, in science, it means we're just pretty sure that this change that we made, like reducing the salt, actually created that result of the change in the blood pressure, which was 0.02%. Now, for me, if I actually am being told to reduce salt and then I find out that it's only 0.2% benefit, I'm going to be like, give me back the salt. It makes my food taste nice. Like, that's not enough of an impact for me to actually really choose that as a viable option.
Yeah. I want to get on to vitamins and minerals and essential nutrients, because that's another big drawback that I hear from people with carnivore diet. And it was one that I had to sort of be convinced of as well, because, we're told all our lives that, veggies and fruit and even whole grains provide essential nutrients. And if we're taking all that out and just eating meat, what do we have to supplement for? And until I realized and learnt that actually you get everything, if not more, from meat, particularly those really, those amino acids and the protein, obviously, and all of those building blocks to heal. Without the fiber, particularly for me as for Crohn's, it was the big sell was for me, obviously hearing online people's success with Crohn's disease and the carnivore diet. But the big thing was, okay, I get all the protein. I get a good amount of protein to heal and to satisfy me. I get the fat, which, as I understand, protects protein, but also it allows things to go through smoother. It gives me energy, gets me into ketosis, which is a great form of energy. And then it's no fiber, because I've been told all my life you have to have a low fiber diet. And typically that's the opposite to what a good diet should be. It should be apparently a high fiber diet. But so if you're eating a low fiber diet, they say, so that means, just choose white bread, white rice, potatoes, pretty much everything that doesn't have a color and is just white. And by the way, doesn't have any nutrients, but that's not really important anyway. As long as it goes through nice and smooth through your gut, you shouldn't have any trouble. So it's a real mechanical issue. But with carnivore diet, it was like, actually, I can eat nutrient-dense foods that are supportive for my body to heal, that also have that mechanical benefit too, that go through nice and easy. And then I learned that, hey, if you eat a good ratio of fat, that can help your digestive system to be regular. So that was the big sell for me. But can you explain, how do we get the essential nutrients from just eating meat?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting one because I've just been teaching on this actually as well. And that is, when it comes to nutritional studies, what we actually find is that, when I did my nutritional studies, right, we're told that there are 13 essential nutrients that we actually need. And that includes like your macros and that includes your micros. So your macros are like your fat, your protein, and carbohydrates. So we're told that carbohydrates are essential in our nutritional courses. And then we're told the essential, vitamins and minerals are things like D, E, K, A, your B vitamins, vitamin C. And so we're taught those different things. And the interesting element
can
is...
I just stop you there too? With essential nutrients, as I understand it, those are the nutrients that we can't create ourselves.
Exactly.
We can't. So we need them through our diet.
Exactly. Correct? And that's what qualifies as an essential nutrient. So there are things that your body can actually make, and there are things that your body can't make. Like your body can make some cholesterol, but it's also beneficial to add some of that actually in as well. But it can't make things like vitamin C. Us and goats, I think there's a couple of other animals in the world that can't make their own vitamin C. We're one of those. And so an essential nutrient means that you have to eat it to be able to access it or to have it in your body. Now, carbohydrates are included in this, which is why I think it's really interesting, because you can make carbohydrates. You actually don't have to eat carbohydrates. You can turn fat into carbohydrates. You can turn protein into carbohydrates. We have processes that allow us to actually do that. So therefore, carbohydrates don't fit into that essential nutrient space. Like, it doesn't fit under that definition of being an essential nutrient. And so for me, as a naturopath, where we, a naturopath has to do all the studies of a nutritionist as well as all the studies of a herbalist. And so the two come together, and that's what a naturopath is. And so I've done all my nutritional studies, and I remember when I went carnivore, I was like, this is going against like a lot of that actual training that I've been taught. Like, and even when I was using GAPS, which is gut and psychology syndrome, it's a meat heavy diet. We're still eating some vegetables, and we're still eating things like sauerkraut and so on to get vitamin C, etc. So how do we get that without those things? And I went on this conundrum, and it took me about 6 months to really do the research and refine it to the process of going, actually, we haven't been taught that there are two types of vitamin C. We've only been taught that there's one type of vitamin C. And that one type of vitamin C that we get taught is that it's heat-damaged vitamin C. So if you've got an apple, for example, and you eat that apple, you'll get vitamin C from that apple. But if you take that apple, you cook that apple, you've now destroyed the vitamin C in that apple. And so the apple is no longer available, that vitamin C in that apple is no longer available to us. But there's another type of vitamin C that hasn't been researched, hasn't been looked at for a really long time, and that's called non-heat damaged vitamin C. And non-heat damaged vitamin C is in all of your meat. Every single animal product has non-heat damaged vitamin C in it. And for me, that was like a game changer, realizing that, holy dooly, this whole thing has been here the whole time. We've just assumed that there's no vitamin C in meat because nobody was looking to see if it was there. Now we've got some great studies that actually tell us that there is vitamin C in meat, and it's a different type of vitamin C, which is non-heat damaged vitamin C, which is great for us because I can cook my steak and still get my vitamin C at the same time and enjoy that. And so I went down this process of really looking at each of those essential nutrients and seeing, where can we get them? Where do I find them? And am I going to get them in my diet if I'm not eating the plant sources where we're told that we actually get those from? And yes, absolutely, your beef has every nutrient that you actually need for life. Eggs have every nutrient that you need for life. Like, all of your animal sources have every nutrient from that essential nutrient space that you actually need for life. And that was, for me, that, okay, I feel good sharing this now. Like, because I knew it was working for me, but I wanted to make sure that I ticked all those boxes before I started to share it for other people as well.
Yeah, that's a big deal. And it's also a big deal. Like, I find I factor in now my old supplementation kind of budget into my meat budget, because I've realized that, contrary to what people are thinking, oh, what vitamins are going to miss out on, it's like, no, these you get, higher D3, you get your Bs, you get your amino acids, you get your magnesium, and they're as I understand it now, I'm not coming from a learned perspective, but as I understand it, these nutrients are more bioavailable, often from a meat source. Can you talk about
Yeah.
that?
So one of the things that I love, for me, I've always been what I would call a low supplement practitioner, because there's problems with supplements. Like, for example, most supplements are going to have some type of filler in them, no matter what it actually is. Like, majority of them are going to have some type of filler. Now, that filler could be rice, that filler could be cotton, it could be something like microcellulose, which microcellulose is our clothes. When we're done wearing them and they can't be worn anymore, they get sent over to India or China, and they bleach them, they dry them, and then they turn them into a powder, and then they sell it back to us so that we can put it into our supplements. I don't want to eat clothes. I'd rather eat like actual food than I would those types of things. So all supplements have some type of issue. And the other thing that I want to say here is that we humans think that we are so clever, but we only know what we currently know. We don't know what we don't yet know. And what we might find in another 10 years is that we actually do more studying, we get more microscopic, and we get more nanoparticles and all of that type of stuff, is that in order to be able to absorb this particular supplement or nutrient that's in this supplement, we also need these 5 other things that we didn't know that we needed, because we didn't have the research and the knowledge and the technology to help us find that. When you eat food, you don't have to worry, am I taking K3 or K2 with D3? You don't have to worry about that, because they come packaged together. Like, eat butter, you're going to get vitamin D3 and you'll get the K2 all in that one piece of food. And
Yeah.
that's the beautiful thing about it for me, is that when you eat food, you're going to get all of those micronutrients and the nanonutrients that we yet don't even know about when you're eating that. And I'd much rather people spend a lot of money on good food than they do on supplementation and pills and eat garbage because they can't afford to eat good food.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Wow. I'm going to look into that. What was that? No, not fat soluble. The vitamin C, the other type of vitamin C,
Non-heat damaged vitamin C.
non-heat damaged vitamin C. Yeah, I haven't heard about that, so that's really interesting.
Well, the other
Awesome.
beautiful thing as well, like, we're talking about vitamins. We've got what are called our fat soluble vitamins and our water soluble vitamins. And so our fat soluble vitamins are things like vitamin D, E, A, etc. Those ones actually are able to get into our bodies really, really easily. You can eat something like steak with fat on it, which is where those fat soluble vitamins are going to be. You can eat that and it can get straight into your cells. When it comes to your water soluble vitamins, water and oil don't mix. And so when you're consuming your water soluble vitamins, you also have to be making sure you're having enough salt with those so that they can transport those vitamins into your actual cells. Because you might have it out in your blood, but if it's not getting into your cells, it's not actually helping those cells be strong and robust and create healthy immune actions and so forth. And so we've got this whole story when it comes to nutrition of like, eat low salt, eat low fat, and eat a lot of vegetables and eat less meat, etc., etc. Like, that's the whole picture of what people get told to do. And I look at that and I go, you're setting people up for malfunctional cells because they're not getting enough of those fats to make healthy cells. You're setting them up for low nutrients when it comes to their fat soluble cells. And you're setting them up for not being able to absorb and utilize those water soluble ones because you're telling them to have low sodium as well. And so that whole picture is actually designed for illness versus health and wellness.
Yeah, it makes total sense. Now, just to summarize that, if we can, we've talked about a number of things as to why carnivore is just so effective and holds so much potential for people with chronic illness. The things we've covered are the toxic load, and there's a number of other things. Can you just summarize in a nutshell why it's so impactful for chronic illness?
So the way I like to talk about this is with the detox pathways. So most of us know when I say the term detoxification, they think about the liver. And the liver is the powerhouse of detoxification. It does the bulk of the work, but it can't do all of the work all of the time by itself. And sometimes it has to call in friends to help it. And so for those that are listening at home, I want you to mentally tick in your mind how many of the friends in your physical own health are being called in to help you with toxins. So there are what we call 5 accessory detox organs. One is your lungs. So if that lung is actually compromised because it's doing a lot of detoxification, you're going to get bronchitis, tonsillitis, lots of colds and flus. You might get asthma. You might get a cough that manifests itself every so often, but is not really anything if you go to the doctor. And they're just like, yeah, it's nothing. It's just a cough. So the lungs are one. The skin is another. So when the skin is doing a lot of detoxification, you get eczema, you get psoriasis, you get rashes, you get rosacea, you get those types of things going on. When the bowels are being called in, and this will fit into your category, when the bowels are being called in, you're going to get ulcerated colitis, you're going to get Crohn's disease, you're going to get irritable bowel syndrome, you're going to get things of that nature like constipation, diarrhea, etc. And that's your bowels helping with detoxification. They're being that accessory detox organ. Then we have our kidneys. So our kidneys do a whole bunch of that, and you might find that you're urinating a lot. You might have UTIs, so you're getting lots of bladder infections, etc. You might even get, for women, we might get some thrush down there, and that's generally coming from the kidneys doing a lot of detoxification. And then the last one for everybody is the immune system. And this is for those autoimmune people. If you've got an autoimmune condition, it's not that your immune system is broken. And that's the story that we've been told, that you've got a broken immune system. Your immune system isn't broken. It's just confused and busy, because instead of doing immune work, it's actually going, oh, I've got to get rid of all these toxins that the liver has sent over to me, and he's too busy to deal with them, so I need to deal with them. And instead of focusing on what the immune system needs to do, it's focusing on 10 different other jobs to help out with these toxins. Now, there's one extra detox pathway for women, and that is the period. So for women, we have this emergency get out of jail detox pathway, and that is via the blood in the period. And so we pull all that toxic blood into the uterus, and then we wonder, why do we get endometriosis? Why are we getting PCOS? Why are we getting some of these infertility issues when the blood that's literally sitting in the uterus is full of toxins helping us detoxify? And so when you ask that question, why is Carnivore so effective with helping all of these different things? If you're one of those people that ticked even one of those things as being a problem for you, it comes back to the liver has got too many jobs to do, and it just can't get through them all. And it might be that you've got a gene mutation that limits the amount of ability your liver's got to detoxify. It might be there are a couple of other things that your liver has got challenges with, but its list is too big, and it calls out to the accessory detox organs. Yo, I am so flat, chat. Please come and help me take care of some of this. And they're friends. They jump in and they help, but to their own detriment, which is where we see these organ systems breaking down, which is why when you go carnivore, you dramatically reduce the amount of toxins that are coming into your body, and you dramatically amplify the amount of nutrients that go in there. So you give that liver all the things that it actually needs to start doing that process and that job with, and it can start ticking off those boxes. It doesn't need to ask the skin anymore to detoxify. It doesn't need to ask the lungs anymore to detoxify. It doesn't need to ask the bowels anymore to detoxify. It doesn't need to ask those accessory organs to do those jobs, which is where the breakdown happens.
Will many of these people have to be on carnivore for the rest of their life? Do you see people? I mean, what you're sort of explaining there is a bit of a detox that seems to me like, oh, that's maybe just for a period of time till I heal and my symptoms go away and I'm feeling great. And what I've realised on carnivore diet is it's so restrictive, or it seems so restrictive to start with. It's like you're just eliminating, most of the color and the vibrancy in the diet, and just going with meat, and like that seems so boring and so hard. And then you realize how satisfying meat is, and how the cravings just kind of go away. So I can literally have, a dinner the night before, 6 o'clock or whatever, no breakfast. It can be 12, 1 p.m., 2 p.m. And you could lay a spread of the yummiest danishes and cakes and whatever. And I look at it and I go, I don't need to eat it. There's a switch that flicks off that you don't realize, and you won't fully appreciate until you start the carnivore diet.
So I will jump in with the restriction part. And for me, I think that actually, while you're reducing the amount of food that you're actually having, you're actually amplifying the amount of freedom that you actually have. Like, it's so freeing to go into a supermarket and know there's really only two places that I can shop. It's like the egg aisle and the meat aisle. And that's about it. And it's pretty easy to go in and get what I actually want. The other part of that is, and you'll hear this from people who have got what is a carbohydrate or a sugar addiction problem, is, for me, I personally can't get away with a little bit of avocado and get away with a little bit of berries and those types of things, because they're what I would call trigger foods. If I have a little bit of avocado, I'm like, oh, yeah, that was so nice, and I got away with it. Then I'm like, well, I could have a bit more, and then I could have like this, and I could have this, and then suddenly I'm back at donuts, because they've become gateway foods for me, being somebody who's got an actual addiction to that. And that addiction comes from my insulin resistance sort of phase, where my body is so used to having carbohydrate as my major energy source that it's not quite yet turning on fat to do that process real well. And so from one perspective, I can't do those foods at this point in time. I don't know if I'll ever be able to do those foods and whether I want to do those foods. I know some people can. And it's really about finding where your sweet spot sits with some of those things. But really the answer to that question, which was the question that you started with, was, do you have to be carnivore forever? And the answer to that really is, it all depends. And I think about it from a spectrum. So I think about it from hypercarnivore to lion's diet. So hypercarnivore is where 70% of your food is actually meat-based. And then maybe 30%, or it might be a bit 80-20 sort of, in that sort of range, where 20% of it might actually be fruits and fruit-type vegetables, as well as maybe a little bit of grains, etc., depending on your body and how well and healthy you are. Now, that's for somebody who's super healthy. They have no health problems. That's what I think might be a healthy diet for those people who don't have any health problems. I don't know very many people like that, maybe some kids. And then we move along that continuum into standard carnivore, which has got meat and some spices and herbs and those types of things. Then we move into strict carnivore, which is, just meat and salt and water. And then we move into lion's diet, which is just ruminant animal meat, salt and water. And depending on how sick somebody is, depends on where they need to sit in there and for how long. Now, if you've had a chronic health condition, autoimmune condition, for a really long time, I can tell you, you can always be carnivore and never have a problem, but you might have problems if you start to move down that spectrum. And so it's a conversation that I think needs more discussion around, because, again, if you're somebody who's got blood glucose issues, you're going to always want to stay in the keto space. If you're someone who's got autism, ADHD, any of those neurological, depression, etc., you're going to want to stay in the keto space. You don't want to have too much flexibility when it comes to fruits and vegetables, because it will drag you back down that pathway of your brain not working as well as you want it to. And so there's lots of things in the mix of that. So I don't think people have to be carnivore for the rest of their lives. I think some people are probably going to need to be, especially if they've had autoimmune diseases for about 20 years or so prior to coming to this. They're likely to need to stay in that space. But it also comes down to, are you a carbohydrate addict? Because it's like being an alcoholic. You don't go and give an alcoholic a little bit of wine because, oh yeah, they're good now. You know to stay away from that. And so do carbohydrate addicts too.
Yeah.
So I hope that opened the conversation up a little bit more.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I guess I want to move now to say, it's been a great apologetic for the carnivore diet so far. Just hearing all of that information, I feel like we've touched on so many sort of objections to the carnivore diet, and you've been awesome to sort of explain the reasons behind some of those objections and give solutions, and that's been fantastic. And so, but now, I mean, might be wondering, so how do I start? Can I just start? Is that irresponsible of me to actually, without really having I know you're a consultant, a health consultant, and ideally I think everyone kind of embraces, a naturopath or some sort of functional medical practitioner that can support them and is supportive of a, animal-based carnivore diet. But a lot of people feel like they don't, or maybe it's an extra expense, or they just don't know where to find one. How can they sort of start with a carnivore diet, and would you recommend that they do it, and how would they do it?
Yes, so I love that question, because I think that if you are somebody who's reasonably healthy and well, like you don't have major health issues, you can probably just start. And now, one of the things that I actually do for my clients is I get them to do what I call an apple challenge before they start. And that apple challenge is you've got to eat 6 apples a day for 3 days. You can eat whatever else you like in those 3 days, but you need to eat 6 apples. Now, the reason for that is we're flooding the body with pectin. And that's because a lot of people have come from this space where they've been eating low fat. And if they've been eating a low fat diet, then they're likely to have the buildup of gallstones as well as kidney stones, especially if their diet has been high in oxalates. And so that pectin softens those stones. Now, if there's somebody who's got bowel issues or they've got blood glucose issues, we're just going to go with a supplement instead of actually the apples. But if we can do the apples, we do 3 days of the apples so that we're softening any stones, so that when we start the fat, we're stopping there being any issues. And if you go and Google keto or you go and Google carnivore, one of the things you'll see is everybody gets gallstones and has to have their gallbladder out. And it's not that they get gallstones, they already had gallstones. And the fat that they increased in their diet just mobilized those, and that was the problem. Whereas if we soften those stones and then we mobilize them, we don't have that problem. Now, that's for someone who's generally healthy and well. I'm happy for them to go do that and then start. And what I would say to them is, for the first 14 days, pick your favorite meat. Like, I love salmon. I love a sirloin steak. I love lamb cutlets. Like, pick your favorite ones. Fill your fridge with your favorite ones and look forward to each meal. Instead of going, oh my gosh, all I get to do is eat meat, go, oh, I get to eat like 2 pieces of salmon instead of the 1, and all the salad that I have to eat to fill myself up afterwards. And I get to eat the sirloin steak that I rarely get because it's expensive. Like, look forward to your actual meal for the first 14 days, because that's when your sugar cravings are going to be the worst. After 14 days, you've actually started to release the chemical components of those sugar cravings, and now you're starting to deal with the habitual ones, which are much easier to deal with when you're coming from a fair playing field. Think about budget after that. Then go to your cheap cuts and so on after that. But look forward to those meals for the first 14 days. But if you are somebody who's got a chronic health condition or have had a chronic health condition for a long period of time, ideally I would say go get some general bloods from your GP so that you know exactly where you're at before you actually start, and then get them done again at 12 weeks so that you can actually see the difference in your bloods. And maybe connect in with a practitioner, because if you've been chronically sick, you're likely to also be chronically undernourished, and you might need some extra support to get you to the place that you need to be so that you're on that even playing field and then can just move forward with eating meat. But the other element that I want to add into is that habitual stuff. And that habitual stuff, and I think for me, I started to go through this probably after my first 12 months of carnivore. And after that period of time, it was like, suddenly, I now have to deal with some of my life stuff, because I focused on carnivore for the first 12 months, but that meant that I stopped emotional eating. And now I've got all these emotions and I've got all these things that I have to deal with, and I can't just eat my way through them. I've actually got to deal with them. And that's another sort of side note as well, that I think that's where people start to come undone, is when they don't yet plug into why were they eating the foods that they were eating in the first place. And some people it's just fuel, but for a lot of people, especially because I work with a lot of women, a lot of it is we're suppressing our emotions with food, and then we suddenly stop doing that. We've got to start dealing with the emotions that actually we have been ignoring for such a long period of time as well. So there's a couple of factors there.
Yeah, that's huge. There's some real work to be done. We're always looking for, the outside solution, aren't we?
Mm.
Oh, whether it's a pill or whether it's a diet, whatever, we're looking for the answer, and we're looking for it to be contained, that whole answer to be contained in that sort of that outside kind of thing that we take in, and we've got the right diet now. Oh, this is the right diet. That's the right pill. This is the right supplement, regime or whatever. But I find so often there is these internal things that are all a part of the healing. And you're so right. When I think about going and eating whatever it may be, I think I'm usually tempted by like yogurt or something like that, which may be fine for people without chronic illness. But I know that, it brings in some of the sugar. And I'm not sure yet really whether I tolerate dairy that well. So I've just started to go off it. I've had pretty much all of my symptoms for Crohn's have gone, including the energy thing, which is just great. The energy just plows on like consistently all day. And that's a massive thing for Crohn's people. But the swelling, joints, random swelling in joints, and at times the brain fog, like we probably witnessed a few minutes ago. I just lose where I am, and then there's no more words in my head. And that's too. I've got a lot of scarring in my gut. So I've got about a 5 to 6 centimeter section in my gut where they can't get any instruments past, like a colonoscopy or anything. They can't get anything past there because there's just too much scar tissue, whether it's from surgery or the build-up of ulcerations and then scarring from that. So that's always going to be an issue unless I get it cut out or whatever.
I want to say that maybe it won't. And what I mean by that is, and this is probably the space that you want to start looking into, is actually looking into that space of autophagy. And men get into it really easily. Women have to generally tend to work a little bit harder to get into it. Or if you've got diabetes, you have to work a little bit harder to get there. But the space of autophagy is where your blood glucose and is divided by your ketone level. So you test your blood ketones and your blood glucose. And you want that number to be a 3 or below. If your number is below a 3, you're in what we would call bioautophagy. And bioautophagy is where your body goes back and it eats damaged cells, and it starts to create healthier ones. And so it has that process of being able to repair damage that's been done to your body. Now, it's not going to make you grow back organs, but it can actually start to change scar tissue. And this is, I know, one of the questions that you were saying to me is like, how do we get new hair and what happens with our eyes and those types of things? And the answer to that question is that your body, especially if you're getting into autophagy, which is super easy to get into if you're carnivore, especially if you're male, not so easy if you're a woman and you've got some hormonal issues. You've got to do some work before you can get there. But if you start to look into autophagy and getting into that biochemical state of autophagy, not just fasting, you want to make sure that you're actually hitting those biochemical markers of your blood glucose divided by your ketones equals what's known as your GKI. And that GKI number we want under a 3. When it's under a 3, your body is doing cellular repair, which means that it's not just reproducing the same damaged cells that it's normally doing. It's actually going back and repairing the damage that's been done to cells. And that's where we see people do amazing things. Like for me, I don't wear glasses anymore. I haven't worn glasses for the last, year at least. I actually don't even remember where my glasses are because I haven't needed them. But I needed to wear glasses every single day of my life beforehand. But my eyesight has been able to repair itself. Same with a whole bunch of other things because of that state of autophagy. And it's something that I practice on a long-term basis to get my body into a state of autophagy at least once a week so that it can actually do that cellular repair of the damage that has been done.
Okay, wow. Okay, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
That's super interesting. I'm going to have to dive into that more and maybe with you later because that'd be great to be able to repair some of that damage that's been done. And I have not been I didn't even get a blood test before I started Carnivore. I found it so hard to even find a GP that I can work with that doesn't just want you out in 10 minutes. I'm sorry. I don't mean that as an offense to GPs. I'm sure there's
it's our
great
system.
ones out there. But it's just so hard. Like I went in I've been in and tried to get this kind of swelling, joint swelling, looked at, but they don't know. They just don't even know where to start, it seems. And so I've got to kind of seem to find my own solutions for it.
Yeah, and I will add as well, like when I hear joint swelling, there's two things that go through my mind. One of which is it your body doing repair work, or is it your body having an inflammatory response? Because it could be doing either. And for example, one of the ways our body will store toxins is in the waters of our body. So every joint of your body has water around it. And in that interstitial fluid is what we call it, will harbor those toxins, ideally so our lymphatic system can get rid of them. But if our lymphatic system's getting rid of everything, it gets overloaded and it can't do all that job. And so anything that stays stagnant within our body for a long period of time turns into stones. And those stones will start to grate on each other. And that's where we start to see people getting osteoporosis and arthritis and things like that. Because the stones start to grate and then they start to degrade the actual bone itself. And so the reverse has to happen. When you start flooding your body with lots of nutrients, your body's going to flare up old injuries so it can get in there, move everything around, bring in what it needs to, and then it'll pull back out and the inflammation will go down. And you'll end up with healthier joints at the end of it. Now, it could be that, or it could be the other, where you've got some inflammatory damage where you're bringing something in. And I would say that's probably likely for someone with Crohn's, is that there is some immune connection with dairy. So your immune system's probably agitated by dairy because you've probably, taught it over the duration of your life that dairy is a problem and it's an invader. And so your immune system's got to forget that before it can actually do the other, where it doesn't inflame itself when you're consuming dairy.
Okay, interesting. And dairy is probably one of, and maybe gluten as well, one of the sort of first culprits you would go to.
Well, so in my practice, remember, it's a choose your own adventure type of thing. So one of the things that I'll do for people who aren't yet ready to go carnivore, aren't yet ready to make super significant changes in their diet, is I'll run a hair analysis where we test their body against 600 different foods. And I can tell you gluten is a big one. Milk, not necessarily cheese and butter and so on. Sometimes those are a problem. Goat's dairy tends to be much less problematic than cow's dairy for a lot of people. But the other thing is eggs, chicken eggs. Not duck eggs or quail eggs, but most predominantly chicken eggs. And the same with chicken. Chicken tends to be a really high triggering food for a lot of people as well. And so just switching some of those things, like switching your chicken eggs to duck eggs, switching your chicken to turkey or duck or something like that, can be a game changer for a lot of people when it comes to inflammatory foods. And I could talk about all those things forever and a day, because there's lots of amazing reasons why they're a problem. But we would be here forever.
Yeah. Big question. Coffee. What about coffee? Do people have a problem with coffee? What do you find? Is it inflammatory?
This is the thing that I say to people when it comes to coffee. If you can't drink coffee black, you don't like coffee. You like whatever you're sticking into that coffee. So if you can drink it black, I'm good for you to have it, as long as you don't have any caffeine sensitivities. But if you
I'm just
can't...
looking for my wife's face right now. She can't hear this conversation, but if she could, she'd be like...
If you have to stick something in that coffee, like you have to, add milk to it or sugar to it, then you don't love coffee. You love milk and sugar that's flavored with coffee. And so that doesn't mean you can't have coffee. I'm happy for you to add cream to it. I'm happy for you to add butter and egg yolks to it and make it a frothy latte and those types of things. But it all depends on your sensitivity to caffeine. I wouldn't say it's a health promoting food per se, but I'm not going to say that it's completely detrimental. It is for me. I can't drink coffee because I'm caffeine sensitive. And so it just doesn't work. It sends my blood pressure up, et cetera, et cetera. Other people, it's not so problematic.
Okay.
It's not a holy grail that I'm going to die on.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's just one of those things too that, I feel like, okay, you take away all my veggies and all that sort of stuff, but don't take away my coffee. And it might be a big the final, like, no, I can't do carnivore because I can't give up my coffee. But what you're saying is it might not necessarily be the case, but then you need to think about, limiting that, milk, sugar, obviously. I love black coffee. It's a ritual for me. I drink it in the morning. I smell it. I breathe it in deeply. It just feels like a spiritual experience for me. And I feel good on it. I feel like myself. But I understand too that there's probably a time for me to go off it for a month and see how I go. And I'm thinking of that this month coming up, April coming up. It's my birthday month. And I'm still, I feel like I'm like 80, 90% there. And I just I've come this far and I just want to go, look, it's only a month. I'm going to give up my coffee and maybe go to I don't know, what do you suggest? Maybe going to a more of a lion diet, really simplifying things to see, for a month to see what happens.
I would say 6 weeks.
6 weeks.
6 weeks. And what I mean by that is you could do it in stages. So I would do the coffee out for 14 days, then go Lion's diet with no coffee for 4 weeks, because it's going to take 14 days for the caffeine to actually properly leave your system and the withdrawals to happen and so on. So you don't want to be like on the most limited amount of food while you're going through withdrawals. And you also want to give yourself a good amount of time for the Lion's diet to actually do the work that you want it to do.
Yeah, great. Excellent. Now, if somebody, just say normal, everyday people, don't have any major chronic illness, they want to try the carnivore diet, and how long do you think that they should commit to be on it to sort of try and assess the benefits and the results? And then opposed to, we sort of talked about, people with more serious chronic illness, how long that might be, and that's how long's a piece of string. But say for the average person, what sort of commitment is involved here to be able to see the benefits of the carnivore diet?
Well, I would say to people, give it at least 90 days. Start a 90-day quest. And I say a quest because I want it to be something that you're journeying on versus a challenge that you're facing. So a quest means that it's okay to stumble and it's okay to fall, but just pick yourself up and keep going. Find out why you stumbled and why you fell and learn something from that process. When we go on a challenge, we can go, well, I messed today and it's all blown, I lose, I fail, etc. Go on a quest and actually give yourself 90 days to actually allow yourself to experience what's likely to happen for you during that actual quest. And at that point in time, you're likely to see the benefits. You're going to start seeing some of those things. Like you'll start to see your hair starting to rapidly grow. You're going to start seeing some of the things that are going to actually improve, like your energy, etc., etc. And I would say as well, if you do find that you have any challenges, don't do it alone. There's loads of places that you can go to actually get help. So if something's not quite working, often I find for myself, it's really something really quick, like, oh, you need some extra electrolytes, or, oh, you probably need to be eating some sardines, or, oh, you probably need to just increase some of your eggs. And it's often a really quick fix for me when I hear what people are going through, but they'll sit there in like this place of torture almost, trying to bang their head to do things like they read on some Facebook group, when really, if you touch in with a professional, it really doesn't take that long to get you on the right track. So if you are struggling, touch in and get help. Otherwise, give it a good 90 days and see how you go. Most people I have challenged with that say, go on a 90-day quest, have not actually looked back. They've gone, I'll do it for 90 days, but now they're like a year and a half in.
Yeah. What benefits can they expect? Is it weight loss? Is that sort of par for the course? Is it energy? All these sort of things. Like why should they consider the carnivore diet?
Yeah, so one of the things that I think about when it comes to what they can expect is often people don't realize the crud that they're living in. Like they're so used to feeling lousy that they don't realize that they're actually feeling lousy until you actually start to give them energy and they're like, oh, this is how I'm meant to function. I don't have to walk into a room and forget that what I came in here for. I can actually remember those things and I can sharper on my mind. And those are usually the things that people will see first, is that their energy will start to lift, their mind starts to become sharper. Yes, if they're coming from, say, a standard Australian diet or American diet, then they're going to drop weight. That's generally the case for most people. For some people, they won't, and that's because hormones drive weight. And if your hormones are all out of balance, like your thyroid's out, your adrenals are out, then you really need to eat a lot of fat. And one of the things that I see for women is that they're really chronically under eating fat, because we've had this low fat message for so long that when I say to them, you need to be eating 200 grams of fat a day in order to heal your hormones for at least 3 months, they're like, whoa, that's such a large amount of fat. And they actually have to work up to being able to get in 200 grams of fat a day to actually heal their hormones. Once you've healed those hormones, you can drop back a bit, but you've got to do the healing first of overfeeding to reproduce all those things before you can do that dropping back process. So some of that will change for some people.
I heard of the concept of priming.
Priming is similar to that, especially for women. It's about really overfeeding yourself, and then when you're doing priming, you're usually going to follow that with some fasting. So you might actually do OMAD, where you're only eating 1 meal a day or 2 meals a day, and you're doing some fasting to kind of do that feasting and famine that we would naturally do in the wild. Like if we were hunter and gathering, we would find the beast that we've taken down, we would eat it until we're engorged, and then we would miss out on food for a little while. We don't do that naturally now.
Oh.
Yeah.
Awesome. I think that's a wrap. I think that'll be wow, we've covered so much. We have covered so much today. That's I'm delighted to be able to record this conversation with you, Christina. Honestly, I've been hanging out to talk to somebody, you know, who's a practitioner but also got, you know, the experience and the story and the knowledge. Just super thankful for your knowledge in all the aspects of carnivore, and it's been really enlightening for me today to talk to you, and I can't wait for my audience to be able to hear what you got to say. So thanks so much for your time. Now, can people reach out to you? Can they engage with you further in what you do, and how can they do that?
Absolutely, they can. So they can find me at ChristinaMathewson.com. If you / put in appointments, you can book an appointment. If you / and put in carnivore support, you'll find different ways that I can support you through carnivore as well.
Awesome. Thank you. Are you on socials?
I am. I am definitely on socials. I'm on YouTube. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. Those are the major places you'll find me. But you might see me around a few other places like TikTok as well.
Awesome. I'll put all those, you know, links in the show notes, so if people want more Christina, they can do that easily. Thanks so much, mate. Again, I appreciate it. Hey, it's been great to meet you, and I hope this is not the last conversation we have. No, because I'm on your
You're coming on my show.
Woohoo! That's going to be fun. So thank you again, mate, and we'll talk soon.